Hey guys, this is Saidiella, and today I'm going to go over the basic HUD stats for Hold'em Manager, Poker Tracker, or whatever. HUD is definitely something that people should be using, at least when they're getting used to playing the game of poker. It's extremely useful for a variety of reasons in, almost every situation. So, enough chitter chatter, and let's start talking about some stats. So, in my opinion, one of the top three stats, the most important stats, is the VPIP, and that stands for voluntary put money in pot, and that shows the percent of the time you make a call or a raise before the flop. So, what percent of hands do you play, regardless if it's a call or a raise? So, if someone has a VPIP of 10, that means they play 10% of their hands or 10% of hands. Uh, and we're going to assume it's the best 10% of hands, which would be, sevens plus, ace nine suited plus, and so on. Um, I made a note on the bottom where I said it's not a perfect science. VPIP shows frequency and not actual ranges. And what I mean by that is someone could, in theory, be folding aces and playing seven deuce. Just because it says 10% doesn't mean that they're actually playing the best 10% of their hands, but in reality, more than 99% of the time, that's what's happening. So, if someone's playing 10% of hands, they're playing the big ones. If someone's has a VPIP of 60, then they're playing a lot of junk. So you can definitely use that to figure out what kind of opponent you're playing against. What types of hands will he be holding, and so on. Um, then we have the PFR, which stands for the pre-flop raise, and that shows the percent of the time a player raises pre-flop. So if a player has a PFR of 5, generally that will be 8s plus, ace jack suited plus, king queen suited, and ace king off. 5%. So if someone has a VPIP of 30 and a PFR of 5, that means they play 30%, like generally the best 30% of their hands, but they only raise the best 5. So if this player raises you, you would have a pretty good idea on the types of hands that he would be holding. I'm actually going to switch over to a program that I want to show you guys. The name and the link of this program is underneath. It's a free program. It's really useful. If you know what Poker Stove is, it's very similar to that. And I used Poker Stove years ago when I was actually just getting started with poker and trying to learn more about the game and how to interpret these stats. This program really helped. So, for example, if a player has a VPIP of 30, meaning they, play 30% of hands, then their hand chart would look generally like this. Fives plus, the ace two suited plus, and everything in the middle. Um, if they had a PFR of 5, then it would look like, well, just for these purposes, VP or 5% looks like this. So you mean eights plus and some of the bigger Broadway hands. So if a player with 30 VPIP just calls pre-flop limps, then their chart is looking like this. There's no big hands, none of the biggest hands, but you know what I mean? They have like the ace 10 suited, the ace queen, and etc. I'm not going to go over all of these. But if he just decides to raise you pre-flop, then his range is going to look like this. So it really helps knowing how to read the VPIPs and the PFRs because it will give you a general idea of what types of hands your opponent plays. And as we know, if we can get an idea on what cards our opponent has, then that obviously is a huge plus for us. I mean, poker's all about trying to figure out what your opponent has and try and get value from their hands. I mean, if we know that he has nothing, we can bluff him. If we know he has a good hand, we can fold second best hands. So, information is key. All right, so we're going to switch to the next slide and talk about aggression stats. I made note of three of them: aggression factor, aggression frequency, and aggression percent. I think the only one I'm going to speak about is aggression factor. And it's the most commonly used, and it's calculated as bet plus raise divided by call. So checking and folding will actually have no effect on this stat. The drawback, I made a note and I said the drawback of this indicator is due to its formula. I can't tell the difference between a hyper player raising any two cards and a fit or fold player throwing away everything but the pure nuts. Basically, it tells you if a player doesn't like the call. And for the most part, that is true, but at the same time, take a look down on the bottom. I made a note and I said that passive players are generally below a 1. I should have fixed this and actually said very passive players are below a 1. Passive players, in my opinion, are below a 1.5. Obviously, that depends on their VPIP and PFR. If they're only playing aces, then they're going to be extremely aggressive. Well, assuming that they're betting every street and raising. They're going to look like a maniac when it comes to their aggression factor, but really they're just doing it with a big hand. So if someone has a VPIP of 60 playing, a ridiculous amount of hands, and they have an aggression factor of, 2 or 3 or 4, then in my opinion, they're insane. They're a fish that's just looking to throw their money away because they're playing all these garbage hands and they're super aggressive about it. But if someone is playing, let's say 5% of their hand, so a PF of 5, and they raise pre-flop, and or a VPIP of 5, so they only play 5% of hands, and their aggression factor is a 2, then yeah, it's on the aggressive side for an AF, but they're only playing big hands anyway, so generally they're going to have something. So you can't just look at the FP or the AF and say it's big, he's bluffing. It doesn't work like that. You kind of have to look at all the stats and um, use them to your advantage. They're not going to give you a perfect picture of what's going on in your opponent's hand, but it will help a little. It's like a puzzle. You know, uh, if you learn how to use these stats right, the more you play and the more you get familiar with them, the puzzle starts to form a little more and more. As you put in more pieces, it gets the puzzle gets clearer and it's easier to fill in the rest. Same thing with poker. I mean, having a tiny bit of information, even though it's not going to tell you exactly what your opponent has, it helps to narrow down potential holdings, and it can help you make a value bet on the river. It can help you, fold a decent hand when or on the turn, and it can help you in a lot of different situations. I'm going to bring up a couple of hand examples here really quickly. We're 8 minutes in, so I only want this to be another few minutes. Okay, so right here we have King Jack in the cutoff. We open, the button calls, and the big blind calls. We flop top pair, okay kicker, a couple backdoor flush draws and straight draws, and it gets checked to us, and we make a standard C bet. We get called on the button, which is okay. No alarm bells going off. Not really thinking much about that. And then we get raised. So this is quite interesting. I mean, we have top pair, decent kicker. A couple backdoor draws to flush draws and straight draws. Um, we're never really dead here. Like, what do we do? Well, I mean, we can be leaning towards folding anyway, but let's take a look at his stats. This guy plays 21-15, which means he's only playing 21% of his hands. So he falls into the tight-ish category. He's definitely not loose, but he's not extremely tight. So I mean, he's playing decent cards. Like, this is where numbers should be. 21 is pretty normal stuff. Not much we can get from that. Uh, but then we notice this purple number over here, this 1.3, and that's actually his aggression factor. And as I said, below a 1.5 is passive, and below 1 is extremely passive. So he's, coming up on being extremely passive. So when he makes this raise, originally, I took a second to think about what was going on, but when I noticed his aggression factor, I decided to insta-fold. Yeah, this player, I mean, I've played over or about 1,500 hands with him. That's number in the blue, how many hands I've played with this guy. So I mean, that number's pretty accurate. And I insta-fold here because he is a passive player, and I don't think that's a spot a passive player would decide to bluff. It just doesn't really make sense to me. So anyway, we're not going to follow what's actually happening in this hand, but I think at the end we get to see, yeah, we get to see his 10 jack, and so he flopped two pair and to our pair. So we were drawing pretty thin there on the flop, and by looking at his aggression factor of 1.3, it made it really easy for us to just find that fold button and not to give away any of our money. Uh, so that's one example there of the aggression factor. I'm going to pick out one more. All right, so we have twos. We open under the gun. We get called from the hijack, and we get to see a flop. The flop comes 5-7 jack, which is it's pretty dry. There's no flush draws, not many straight draws. Obviously, this misses his range, his cold calling range, a decent amount. So me being aggressive, I just decide to bet this, and uh, he decides to raise. Now it's a small raise, but I don't want to read into that too much right now. But I only have a pair of twos. I don't have much going on. If he even has like a pair of fives, I'm drawing to just a two, which is pretty thin. So, I mean, if he has a hand here, obviously I'm clicking the fold. So I'm on my way to the fold button, and I take a look at his aggression factor, which is a 2.7. Now, I'm not saying that he's bluffing here all the time, but I'm saying it's a pretty dry board. There's not many big hands he could have. If he has queens, kings, aces, most likely he's betting pre-flop. If he has a set, he might not be raising here. It's a dry board. Obviously, I'm going to fold a lot. If he has like an ace jack, is he really raising? He plays 23% hand, so I don't think he has any two pairs. So it comes down to he either has a set or he's bluffing. So I notice his 2.7 aggression factor, and he's an aggressive player. Like he's pushing up on three, which is you know not really aggressive, but a three is he's capable of making a decent amount of bluffs. So I decided to call here. I mean, I'm putting in $1.17 into a $5 pot, so I only need to win it 1 in 5 times. And but I am aware of the fact that he can bet turn and river here as a bluff. So I decided to call. I think I'm getting the right odds on the flop, and we'll go from here. If the raise was bigger, it'd be maybe a little different. So we call. The turn comes to 4, which doesn't really change much. Um, so we check. I don't see any point in betting because I mean, obviously, if he calls our bet, he has a better hand, and if he folds, he has nothing. So, I mean, I don't see any point in bluffing. Like, if it's a value hand, obviously he's not calling with worse. And if we're bluffing, we're not making any better hands fold for the most part. So I don't know. I like the idea of if he's bluffing, call him down. Don't raise and get all spazzy. If you think you have the best hand, make the call. Give him an opportunity to bluff. So he bets a little over half pot here, and I'm putting in $4 into a $10 pot. So I mean, I'm getting 2.5 to 1. And on top of that, I mean, his aggression factor, I think that he's definitely capable of making this bluff again. Um, so I have to call again. Like I said, I think he either has a set here. Well, most of the time, obviously I can be wrong, but I think most of the time he has against this player type, he has a set here or he has complete air. I don't think he's bluffing or I don't think he's value betting with like ace jack or anything like that. So 7 comes on the river, which really doesn't change anything. And again, I don't see the point in betting because if he has a better hand, he's going to call. If he has a worse hand, he's going to fold. So I'm essentially just giving him money if he has a better hand. And if he has a worse hand, I mean, I should check call or hope to get the showdown. So I check. Obviously, I'm not clear on what I'm going to do if he bets, but he decides to bet really small, and I'm getting, better than 4 to 1. And like I said, with the aggression factor of 2.7, I know he's capable of making this bluff. And so on the river here, I just snap call because I mean it's such a small bet, and I'm getting good pot odds, and I know he's capable of making this bluff, so I call. And it actually turns out that he just has an ace three. So yeah, he got kind of spazzy on the flop and continued to bluff turn and river. And I wouldn't make this call all the time, but just something in my gut told me that I was good. And the fact that he had a 2.7 aggression factor uh, actually allowed me to click the call button as opposed to just normally folding. So anyway, that's that. I hope this was helpful. Check out my Twitch, which is Saidiella. Um, hit me up with a follow, a like. Subscribe to YouTube. I really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, check out my video tomorrow, and good luck on the felt. Saidiella out.